So like many of us, you studied at ANU back in the day. How did you first get into startups?
Oh gosh. Okay, straight into it. Well, it was a sliding doors moment, Sam, so it was an accident, honestly. So I'd finished my 3 years studying a Bachelor of Science here at the beautiful ANU campus. You can see outside the window here. And I was headed to do my master's in organisational psychology, right? So I'm the kind of person that's fascinated about people, all things kind of people and teams and groups and what makes people tick. And I was raised by an engineering dad. My dad was always fascinated with how things worked, and that was kind of how I was raised. And when I was choosing my subjects for my science degree, this is in 1986, he said to me, "Shelley, you should do some computing subjects. It might come in handy one day." And I think computing was still run out of the maths department then. It certainly wasn't software engineering as it is today. And so I did computer science AO1 and AO2. And my life kind of changed because I did that. So my major was psychology, so psych, neuroscience, stats kind of stuff. And then this minor in computer science. So hold that thought. So I was headed off to do a master's degree in organisational psychology, which is what you need to do to be a registered practicing professional psychologist. And in the summer, in between starting my master's, I got a job, didn't I? A summer job in Sydney with a tech startup. And that was in 1989, and I was 19, and I kind of accidentally got a job in a startup. So that kind of changed my life, really. And in answer to your question, that's what led me to the world of a tech startup.
How did you convince your boss to bring you on? You're 19, you have little experience in the workforce. What did you do?
That's the right question to ask. Absolutely. So it was a mix of using my connections and luck. Yeah, which is what life is really about, is you've got to be there to get the luck, right? So it was supposed to be a summer job because I had a plan for what I was doing next March. And let's say this was November after I finished my exams. My boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband of 33 years, had already moved to Sydney, and he was working for another tech company. And he'd heard that this other tech company that was in the same building was looking for somebody to teach DOS, right? So a corporate trainer in software technology.
What is DOS?
It's a disk operating system. It was Microsoft's first operating system before Windows.
Oh, wow.
Right.
So,
I mean, I asked myself that same question at the time, right? But how did I talk my way into that job? Look, it was timing. This guy was running a startup. He couldn't afford to hire someone that had the appropriate experience, right? Because that would have cost him kind of 3 times the amount that he was prepared to pay me. So, and this is the world of startups, right? They're lean, they haven't got a lot of money, they need a lot of energy and a lot of passion, not necessarily someone that wants the money, right? So he had rejected a whole bunch of highly qualified, more experienced professionals than me. They could have done the job, but he couldn't afford to pay them what they wanted. And he probably looked at that style of person and they would have maybe not had the right DNA for that company. So here I came in late in the interview process. So he'd already kind of finished interviewing, and my boyfriend at the time knew someone that said, "Shelley's done 2 units in computer science from ANU, and maybe she knows what she's doing." Anyway, so I got the job. He paid me as a graduate. Actually, it was quite a good salary. So I'd been a poor, starving student like everybody, and so this money every fortnight in my pay packet was fantastic, so I would have taken anything he offered me, really. And essentially he just threw me in the deep end and said, "You can do it. I believe in you." And every day I was absolutely petrified for a long time. And so I was literally teaching, like lecturing corporate, mostly men in suits who had had their secretaries taken off them. So this was the late 80s. PCs were new in the world. They were, so businessmen, if you like, mostly businessmen, had secretaries or typing pools. And so they'd write their letters and someone would type them up. And the new corporate way was that they had to type their own letters. So there I was teaching corporate, mostly men, how to type their own letters. So they were cranky and they really didn't want to learn. So I had a baptism of fire.
What was that experience like, just throwing you in the deep end? You've got to learn how to swim. You're on your own.
Yeah.
How did you get through that?
Well, I was nervous every day, physically overwhelmed, so far out of my comfort zone it wasn't funny. And my boss was the perfect asshole, right? Like, he was the kind of guy that said, I have hired you to do this job, just go do it, right? Here's the manual. You just have to be one page ahead than everybody else. You don't have to know the whole manual. And at the time I probably didn't appreciate that enough, but it was so true. And really what it came down to was relating to the people, having empathy for their situation, because they were really pissed off that their secretaries had been taken off them and they had to do their own typing, right? It was a thing. But also my boss was working for the organisation, and the whole point of the work that I was doing was to help these senior executives to be comfortable with new technology. And so that's, if you have that mindset, I applied every single one of my psychology skills to what I was doing. It wasn't about the tech. It was about the people. And they left at the end of the day going, oh, this isn't so bad. I can do this. And in the meantime, when you run that course every day, you get pretty good at it. You actually know what you're talking about. And so you get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into understanding the technology. So all of a sudden I was actually a technology professional.
Wow. What advice do you have for young people out there who are also looking for that startup experience? What are some strategies to get that sort of mentorship and experience in a startup?
Yeah, well, Canberra is a really good place for that. I'm very passionate about this ecosystem here. There's a lot of really smart people in this city. And in fact, this city has some of the world's largest technology projects that are going on right now all around it, and people don't quite realise. So we've got some of the biggest funded public projects, the Department of Defence, Tax Office, our Human Services, Home Affairs projects are literally 4 of the biggest projects in the world right now. So that attracts some very seriously talented technology professionals to this city, and they bring with them their partners and their families, and so it makes for a really diverse and fabulous ecosystem here in Canberra, a really truly global city. So there's a lot of innovation here. There's an organisation called the Canberra Innovation Network, which is where we met, Sam, or through we met.
Yeah, exactly.
I believe. And I've been a very enthusiastic advocate of that organisation. It's funded by the ACT government and run independently by innovation experts who are the best in the world. And so this kind of ecosystem brings together people who are experienced entrepreneurs, who are currently entrepreneurs and who are budding entrepreneurs, plus a beautiful mix of academic excellence and research excellence with commercial need. So for any innovation to actually thrive, it needs to have a home. So it's easy to have ideas. So there's a lot of people with a lot of ideas. But if you don't have a customer or a product market fit, then it'll just be a great idea. I've got a list of ideas that I've had over the years that you kind of benchmark yourself on. It's like, I knew it. I knew that would be good. And, 5 years later, somebody,
yeah,
eBay or someone did that. That was my idea.
What was one of your ideas where you're like kicking yourself
Oh,
oh
gosh.
my God, why didn't I do that?
Well, not so much me. I'm not so much the ideas person, but my husband, let me tell you, if I had $1 for every idea that he has talked to me about, and 5 years later you go, oh, that's now an electric car company. Oh gosh, I'll think of it later, Sam. I'll think of some things.
Were you interested in starting a company before you got that job?
No. So I didn't. No.
What ultimately convinced you to become a founder?
Well, this particular boss, I described him in a certain way earlier. He is my friend to this day. Yeah. So he's the kind of guy that said, you can do anything that you want. And ironically, he was what I call an inverse role model. I never wanted to actually be like him, but I wanted to be successful.
Yeah.
But not in the style that he necessarily kind of forced me into. But, back in the day, that resilience and the kind of armour that he encouraged me, or it was necessary for me to put this resilience armour on. Otherwise, I just would have to resign. Like, I would not have been able to do the work if I didn't just face up with courage every day, learning quickly. And I think once you've had that kind of experience, you can never go back to work for anyone else. Yeah, you see what it takes, the grit and the courage that he had to start that business, and the tenacity and the determination that he needed for his staff to be successful. There was no giving way to anybody that wasn't showing up 200%. He just couldn't afford it. So I decided, along with my husband, that we wanted to be our own boss. And we had some specific knowledge because of that accelerated learning that I'd been forced to undertake. We knew a whole lot of stuff that nobody else knew. And so we were a commodity. So we went overseas, got some pretty high-profile jobs in tech companies overseas. And once you kind of have a little taste of that and you realise that you're at the top of your game, we flipped to being independent consultants. So we never had a boss. And being contractors around Hong Kong and Singapore, we just saw how the real world worked, and good people doing hard work was really attractive to us. And you can earn big bucks. And then fast forward from there, you're just one person, right? So you can only do one billable hour at one time. So then you quickly start and hire people. So we started to look for other people that had the same courage and the same ability to learn as we did, because in tech, you're always learning. Nothing stays the same. And you're always getting ready for the next version of whatever it is. So we had this DNA that we never wanted to have a boss ever again.
What was your first experience like founding this, I guess it was a consulting company that you were running?
Yes.
Was that an exciting journey? Were there things that you needed to learn?
Yes.
Moving from like an early stage employee to an actual founder, and what were those things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the answer, the one word answer to that is survival. So, I'm a scientist, so this Darwinism was really kind of entrenched in the way you showed up every day. It was, you had to survive. You had to be tenacious. And I think the thing that stood us apart was that we were really good with people. So other engineering firms or other technology firms were dominated by technologists who were, with the greatest respect, and these are my favourite people, right? They're into perfection. Nothing's ever ready. They're polishing the chrome. They won't let it get out. And, I was restless for that commercial kind of success. You had to be able to give someone an invoice and that they would be happy to pay you for it. So there was this chasm that we had to cross. It's a very good book if anyone has read Crossing the Chasm, very famous book, essential reading for any entrepreneur. You have to cross this chasm from your idea or early success through to sustainable success that you can evolve. And look, we started with our first hire, then our second hire, and then our third hire, and then our fourth hire, and then we had to get an office, then we had to get letterhead and business cards, and then someone had to answer the phone. And just every day it evolves and grows, and you have to figure it all out at the same time. And I remember we resisted spending money on anything that didn't make us money because we didn't have any money. Every penny that we made, we saved up so we could hire another person.
How important do you think that sort of customer service mindset was for you? And like, what sort of advice do you have for people? I mean, now we're into the age of like AI, that sort of thing. I'm sure the same sort of situations happen today where there's the technologists, the people who really know the fundamentals, but how do you convert that into a winning business that people look forward to pay for?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? And I think that question, or the answer to that question, is what defines a successful company, or it could be, one of the key traits of a successful business. Because if you don't have that healthy tension between engineering excellence and customer excellence, something will fail, and you can't kind of ride out the hard times. Like nothing ever stays the same, and every natural system has highs and lows and peaks of tide and seasonal winds and things like that blow. So your business has to be resilient so that you can ride out the highs and the lows of whatever the seasonality is that is presented to you, whether it's a political procurement buying cycle, or a technology fad, or some kind of disaster that it's outside your control. So I think the resilience piece is quite important, and the healthy tension, I mentioned it before, between excellent tech and tech that's good enough to put into the market that someone's prepared to pay for.
I heard some advice from an entrepreneur who basically said every meeting you have with the customer, you want to give them more information than they came to you with. It's sort of just like a general framework for this is how to interact with customers and help them out and just establish that relationship.
Yeah.
With your people skills and psychology skills, do you have any other sort of rules of thumb when interacting with customers, and especially from your consulting time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the answer is data, which is generally the answer to most things in this world, is knowing your customer intimately is really important, and particularly in this day and age of kind of mass communications or targeted communications. I think the organisations that are most successful now are the ones who think about what their customer needs and what they're doing with your product, in our case. And they don't really care about your product, that the product's my baby, it's not their baby. What they care about is their work and what they're doing. So the business of what they're doing was really important for us to acknowledge. And a lot of technologists forget. They need a bit of a shake-up to remember that other people don't care about how it works or what platform it's built on or what kind of code or right? Your customer just wants it to work. They want it to be a smooth, seamless, easy process. And so we really had to part the waters between tech and business outcomes, where we were in banking and finance and insurance, so kind of very highly regulated, serious customers. Our sales cycle took 6 to 18 months, so it wasn't an easy sell, and so our customer engagement and our relationship development was critical, far more critical, I would argue, than the actual tech.
I've heard that dealing with sort of like government and defence industries, and I guess if your sales cycle is that long, there's a lot of challenges, trying to sort that out, and it can be pretty stressful and, complicating if deals fall through.
Yeah.
What was your experience with that, and how did you navigate having such slow customers and like slow adopters?
And well, you mentioned the word stress. There was a lot of that. But I also mentioned earlier that you need to put your armour on. You needed a lot of resilience. I think for us, it comes back to what I was saying to you about this wonderful place called Canberra. There's an amazing ecosystem of world-class supply chain. So you had the multinationals, so the guys and girls who were supplying world platforms, right? Global platforms, Microsoft, Oracle, etc., right? And they basically own the pool, that you're swimming in their pond, right? And so if you understood which part of the playground that you wanted to play in, you could actually figure out how you could be successful. So you didn't want to be seen to be competing with those big players. You wanted to have really strong collaborations and cooperation with them. And you wanted to be perceived as their innovation. These are the innovators, right? So a lot of these big companies don't have a lot of time to innovate in a particular thing. They're platform plays, right? So if you could actually influence the customer and explain to them that this little piece of tech is going to unlock all of this value and all of this smoothing out of some of the rough edges. But if you did that in conjunction with a collaborative approach to, the big companies that own the pond that you're playing in, those kind of innovative companies tend to be more successful than the ones that go hard in the competition stakes and try and beat out the big guys. So we had a lot of partners, and we actually added value to a lot of bids and contracts that the big companies won because of our tech being bid in their tender stacks.
How did you find your niche?
Well, it was a matter of knowing your market. So we were in a particular space and we were deep experts. So we were in the world of Microsoft, and I presume you've all used Microsoft Word, but we had been on the Microsoft Word journey from its very first version in the DOS days, Microsoft for DOS, right? So pre-Windows. So you had keyboard strokes and key commands to format your documents and to make words bold and to set your margins and all that kind of stuff, right? And it was an evolution. And so when you know a product intimately and that well and at the back end of it, you can actually get into the back end and customize it. And so that's what we built a piece of software on, was essentially Word Server. So Microsoft Word was only ever able to be deployed on the desktop, and it was constantly frustrating for ourselves and for our clients. And so we saw an opportunity in the market to create a unified, centralised database for word processing activities that banking, finance customers needed.
Awesome. So I'm assuming that's in Intelledox,
That's
the
right.
company that you were starting.
You got it. That's the company.
So you've spoken about your hiring at the consulting company that you started.
Yeah.
What do you look for in those early hires, both at the consulting company and also at Intelledox?
Yeah. So just to clarify, so that consulting company evolved to be
okay.
Intelledox. It's actually literally the same entity.
Oh, cool.
As Darwin. It evolved. So the point at which it had to change, so we changed from being a consulting company to being a product company. And that was out of an alarming emergency in the market. So the federal government changed its rules on who it would buy software and services from, and it was only the big guys made the list. And so the little guys had to scramble. So we commercialised some intellectual property that we already had in conjunction with one of our government clients. So we saw an opportunity. It's like the clouds parted, and we stepped into that unknown territory, and it turned out to be a pretty good decision at the time. Your question was about hiring.
Yep.
So I think if you go back to my first explanation about my first boss, is that we were a startup, so we could not afford to hire people who were qualified for the role that we needed them to perform. So we literally looked for third year, fourth year students from ANU, many of whom are still with the company to this day. And we hired for potential, not for existing skills. So in tech, it's really just about people who can learn, who want to learn, and who turn up every day to work with other good people. Honestly, our team could have built a rocket and flown to the moon. It was more about their attitude and their ability to show up every day for each other, to work together as a team, to solve problems. And you know, and to work to deliver outcomes for our clients. And that, ironically, is what built a very, very strong, I shouldn't say it's ironic, but that over our tech was what built a strong, enduring company, because we had a very loyal team, and nothing ever goes smoothly or in a straight line. So there was always problems to solve, always, you know, hair-raising moments and a lot of long nights and a lot of commitment and dedication. And they didn't show up because, you know, they love banking and finance. They showed up because they love learning new stuff and doing hard things with each other.
How did you assess potential?
Well, you know, I have an undergraduate degree in psychology. So they're being interviewed by somebody who possibly they're not aware of, that has some superpowers in that department. But we used psychometric testing quite early, before it was mainstream, or certainly gave us an indication of the kind of true values of those individuals. And you just know, after a little bit of time, you just know the kind of human that our team would welcome, and also the kind of human that would also challenge our team. So don't just integrate and follow the status quo, but would be respectfully accepted and challenge the team. So we built the building blocks of that very deliberately.
And in the early days, how did you, I guess, attract those top quality people, those people with the most potential?
Yeah, well, it was hard. I mean, you know, we were a company with no profile. Our customers loved us, of course, but and actually, you know, I would say at least a dozen of our customers' staff over the years came to work for us. Not that we poached them or anything, but, you know, over time, they just go, oh, you got any jobs? I remember when we worked with you on that project, we really loved working with you. So reputation is probably the first piece of that. So we attracted a lot of experts, but that was probably later on, actually, after many years. But the reality is you know, we'd take good students at the end of their degrees. They might have had a friend that they knew that they would recommend, and it certainly wasn't, you know, jobs for the boys. It was, if you're recommending a friend, you know, that's on you. And so that was a good thing. So that was a really good outcome for us. And we would train them really well. So they'd get industry standard training. So they would be light years ahead of their friends working, you know, in the government or working on other software engineering projects. So we were in this special Microsoft club where we'd get early release software. So all the new, we'd have it 6 months before it was released to the market, etc. So that was really attractive for our team. But look, we could never afford to hire somebody who had, you know, who actually had the skills. So we would just have to look for somebody who had the potential to do it. It wasn't easy, but the struggle for that built a very strong culture.
What were some of your biggest hiring mistakes?
Gosh. Well, I think, you know, when you are the boss and you actually make the hiring decisions, you tend oh dear, you tend to make really good decisions, right? Because you own those decisions. So in most organisations, somebody else kind of fields the candidates, and then somebody else might make the hiring decision, and then somebody else kind of works with them, and they fade off into the sunset. But for us, it was our own ecosystem. So I would say for the most part, our hiring choices were successful. And the ones that weren't, if you accidentally hired a dickhead, right, you dealt with that really quickly for our benefit and also for theirs. If they didn't fit in, you know, I'd be the first to look them in the face and say, I don't think this is right for you or for us. And so you get out of it really quickly. What do they say? Slow to hire, fast to fire.
I was listening, well, when I first got introduced to you was at the Sebron talk last year with John on the panel, John D. Margheriti. And it was interesting because he said that he'd recently let go of a senior executive at his company. But what I especially found interesting that you immediately said you could have done that sooner.
Yeah.
And it was almost just like you read his mind. I was like amazed.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard to have those difficult conversations? And what advice do you have on just doing that quickly?
Yeah, well, I think I've just seen so many times where if you don't do it quickly, it's not good for everybody, you know. And in particular, the person who you're talking about is not a great hire. I think we overcame that issue really quickly because it just doesn't make sense for everybody, right? And everybody is so different and on a different trajectory. And Organisational Psychology 101 says that the predominating culture will spit out anybody that isn't going to be beneficial to that culture. If they're too challenging, if they're lazy, if there isn't enough commonality and values, the culture will spit them out. So it usually happens naturally. So if you do have a strong culture, that person will realise in 3 to 6 months, they'll go, I need to start looking for a new job because this isn't for me. And, not everything is for everyone.
Did you have certain probation structures that would ensure that you had the best people on?
Yeah, correct. So we had really good onboarding processes, so like a buddy system and training, formal training, and we had a procedure called management by objectives, which is quite a famous thing if you want to look it up. It's very old school, plan on a page, kind of this is what I'm expected to deliver, this is what I'm supposed to be doing every day, this is what I'm supposed to be doing every week, every month, every quarter, every year. So it's very well spelt out and signed by your manager and yourself. And we had daily, weekly check-ins. So I think we probably pioneered that care for our team early because it was such an investment for us to hire anybody, and we needed to underwrite, not undermine. We needed to underwrite their success with our effort, not just expect it to be all about their effort. Loyalty is 2 ways.
Yeah, so underlying all of the hiring and everything is trying to build a culture of excellence within your team, which, as you said, right, that's the best form of resilience because technology is always changing, you always have to adapt. Did you think about that in the beginning? And what was your, I guess you approached through hiring, but did you have any other?
Excellence? Yeah, look, it was always, we've talked about it briefly earlier, it was always a healthy tension between excellence and practicality. Excellence is, is it for galleries and museums? Excellence, is it for school assemblies or academic achievement, right? Excellence in commercial reality can actually be a problem, right? Because excellence can be, the enemy of okay. And if you've got something that is okay to be put in the market, you don't want to get stuck on trying to make it excellent. So it's always this crazy kind of 2 left brain, right brain argument that you have with yourself about, are we committed to excellence? Yes, of course we are. But we have a company to run and we have a bunch of people whose families depend on us to pay them every month. And we have customers who are waiting for this next version and we can't invoice them until the version's in their hands, right? So get on with it, guys. Excellence is the enemy of good.
Yeah, makes so much sense. I'm also curious, technology innovating very quickly, how do you ensure that your team doesn't get stagnant and is always risk-taking and finding new ways to innovate?
Well, I think my team would argue with you back in the day. It's like, just leave us alone. Just let us have some time with this. So I think the kind of people that we hired were always restless, always interested in what the next version looked like. And actually, I had to be really careful not to hire everybody with that kind of characteristic. So we needed some more conservative type of deep thinking, slower pace movement to counteract the attitude of well, let's replace it, let's throw that out, let's keep moving forward. So there's this balance between preserving the core of what you've got, but also moving it forward. But you don't want to rip it forward, right? Because that's kind of risky. The outcome may be unpredictable. But if you have a core of excellence and you have a core of good, your new ideas for new features in your new version or new things that customers have asked for. I mean, that was one of our biggest challenges, was customers would give us a long list of great things that they wanted us to integrate into the software, and we mostly said no. So we had to balance this disappointment to your customer with preserving the core, right? So it was this really interesting debate between how innovative are we and how can we put something of good quality into our customers' hands, right? So if you were too innovative, it's actually risky to put that into the hands of a banking customer because they don't want to be your beta client, right? So we had all of these dynamics going on in our boardroom at all times, and there'd be a lot of arguments, healthy arguments about where is that core, how do we define it, what is innovation, what is risk, and you never come up with the actual answer, but you should always be asking the questions.
Was the reason you said no to the customer, I guess, questions or what they wanted from their product due to risk management, or was it also a component due to, like, you want to focus on your core mission and you want to have all your resources directed towards one thing?
You've answered it in asking the question. Yes. And so in the early days, we would do everything that our customers asked for because you kind of had to. But once you realise that that's actually very risky and it puts beta software into the market, right, that you need to absolutely invite your customers to submit lists and ideas, and then your product team decides what goes into the next version. We could monetize some of those requests from our customers, but what you don't want to be doing is any custom building of your core product for a specific customer, because then down the line it creates issues, it becomes unsupportable. So we kind of learnt all of that in the software engineering world of a real product. You don't want it to be customed.
Yeah, I guess it's more for that scalability piece as well, right?
Correct. Exactly.
How did you decide on your core values? I mean, you said you had a ton of discussion internally. Were there any like overriding principles that you would use?
I don't think so. I think everything evolved, right? And it depended on who was in the room at the time, who had the strongest opinion, what the customer dynamic was at the time. So many things. And I don't think anybody could ever say that they were able to define how they did something. It honestly was about the people in the room and how that discussion and that dynamic went down as to what happened. And that's what matters, is that you've handpicked each one of those people to be in the room to have that debate.
How did you personally have to evolve as the company grew from, I'm just guessing, in Canberra to a global company now? It's huge.
Yeah. Oh, well, you do. And it is really, I mean, you could probably theme this conversation evolution. You just learn and adapt and listen and learn. And we made so many mistakes, right? So you have to fall forward or fail forward from those mistakes. You have to you can't lick your wounds for too long. You've got to learn and then add that into your DNA so that was a positive experience. Feedback is learning. Customers that ring up and say, oh, this is wrong or this is wrong, and you go, oh my God, oh no. And that it was somebody else, some other company, turned some port off or something and the software doesn't work anymore. It's actually not our fault, right? It's somebody else's fault, but the customer's paying us for that software. So you still have to go solve the problem. So you learn all of this stuff and you've got to be ahead of all that all the time, even if it's not a problem that you actually created or caused. So there was a lot of that. a lot of management of other external factors, and we'd never priced that into the price of the software, had we? So next version, there's a price increase. So then you've got to have that customer service strength to be able to have the courage to go and talk to your customers and say, it's going to be 20% more expensive next year because of all of these factors. And so, every time there was a situation, you're learning, you're adding more layers and layers to your wisdom, I suppose.
Nowadays, you coach a variety of technology startups. What's the most common piece of advice for early stage founders and maybe student founders who are looking to get into technology?
Well, certainly in the context of the founders that I coach, I remind them that nobody knows their business better than they do. So this particular stable of founders are probably more scale-ups than startups, and they are global experts in what they do. And sometimes you need someone to slap you around a little bit and say, just trust your instincts. Nobody's written a book or a manual for how to do this. You have to trust your instincts. And I think you never second guess yourself, right?
Was it difficult for you to gain that confidence in yourself in the beginning and just have faith that, you can be the one who can do it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But if you have a genuine intent, you're not pretending, you're committed to that end goal of achieving a successful outcome, and for your customer. I think that's the most important thing to keep in mind. It's not about the tech. It's not about kind of making millions of dollars. It's about your reputation to deliver that outcome. And look, that can change and evolve. You can pivot and learn as you go. I don't know any successful company that hasn't kind of started somewhere and ended up somewhere else and evolving. But that being said, there are certainly some founders who have started something and stuck to that. So there is no right or wrong to any of this. And gosh, I mean, it's so hard to give advice, right? And coaching is not about advising. Coaching is about helping that entrepreneur or that founder to actually organise what they actually think about something. So I think that my advice would be actually really think about what it is that you're doing and what you want. And a lot of successful founders and successful people don't actually stop and map out and think about what it is that they actually want. They're just doing. They're busy doing. So but they're the kind of personalities who are entrepreneurs, right? So find a buddy. Have somebody who is your person, who you can sit down and be vulnerable with and talk to about the frustrations, the highs and the lows. And it's not like you seek advice. It's kind of just like being able to organise your own thoughts while you talk about it and work out your priorities.
What was it like for you? You started the company with your husband.
Yeah.
So you're always talking business.
Yeah.
Could you separate the business and the personal life, and what was that kind of situation like?
It's a good question. I think you could probably ask one of our 3 daughters what it was like growing up in our house. We were always problem solving, always debriefing, always kind of preparing and getting ready, and there was no separation. It was just all was. But we worked hard, played hard. We raised 3 daughters, and we were still very happily married. And we were very fortunate to exit the company in 2019. So right place, right time. We got the luck. We were able to sell our business to the tier 1 vendor in our space. And I now sit on the board of that global company. And our technology represents something like 20% of their technology stack, and we are the innovation in their stack. So I'm still a little bit involved. But Phil and I worked together for a long, long time, and he built a deep trust and respect for each other. The people that are close to us would say that we're light and day in terms of our style, but we just made that work. We took turns in being right.
I'm interested to ask, I read something online that said you would never move to Silicon Valley, even though you could massively increase the value and leverage of your company. People who say they'll move there have probably never been. It's a dog-eat-dog world, very incestuous and competitive, and it's lost its magic.
I say that. It's a long time ago.
The reason I ask is because I am actually kind of interested in going there. I've never been, so I probably know nothing about it.
Yeah.
What's your experience of Silicon Valley?
Yeah, well, it's an amazing place. It's like a bubble, if I could call it that. And in fact, we have many, many close friends who would really not like to hear me say that, who live there. But it certainly is a highly competitive place, which is good. There is an incredible university sector there with Stanford, and then Sandhill Road, which is where all the private equity firms and the venture capitalists hang out. It's kind of like, the sharks on the side of the fish tank, right? I say that with the greatest respect, right? This ecosystem of tech and money and funding is really cool. But what's not there are customers. So it's tech in tech kind of thing, and there's so much money swirling around there and so much largesse. I didn't like it. And, I've never lived there, but I've spent many months and weeks visiting there. And it's a weird dynamic. So nurses and school teachers can't afford to live there. So they've got to commute, 40, 45 minutes to come into the city. And the biggest business in Silicon Valley is psychological services. So people struggling with, kids whose parents are divorcing and fighting over the money, and just all this kind of negative vibe that I found there that certainly I don't see here in Australia.
Yeah, so very different to Australia, it sounds.
It's a weird, and there's a Ferrari dealership on every second corner, right? Down in San Jose.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
it's just,
I get you.
It's a bit off. And for those of us who value our community and family and nature, it's not for me.
That sounds very fair. I guess, at least from my perspective, I see Silicon Valley as like, this is where all the big tech's happening.
It's true.
This is where people are working on the most innovative things.
Yeah. And
I guess that's sort of like inspiring. But at the same time, maybe it's not the best place to live.
Look, you should go and see it for yourself. I would love to know about that.
Business has a ton of highs and lows. What were some of the lowest points in your journey, and what inspired you to get through it?
Well, commercial reality was always kind of, drives your experiences, having enough money in the bank to pay people. So it was like walking a tightrope the whole time. Every deal that we did was basically a company-saving deal, to keep growing. So you'd breathe in and you breathe out with the good times and the hard times, and you try and get that right. And, our accountant every year said, "Oh, you didn't make any money this year." We go, "Yeah, that's because we hired 3 more people. So we spend all the money that we made, right? We're really good at that. Yay." So we'd come in at a zero, we didn't lose and we didn't make. So for us, that was our objective. And there was a time where we kept coming second in all our tenders. So, maybe for like 6 months or 8 months, it was like, second. Okay, so go get the feedback, right? And a tender, you put it in, and one of our big competitors would win, and maybe they were from overseas competitors, and we were bidding to the Australian government, and so then we started to get angry. It's like, come on, guys, we came second, and you gave the contract to a Canadian company. We're Australian. We pay taxes in Australia. We hire Australians. You know, why can't we come first? Please let us come first. So we started to double down in, lobbying for Australian tech companies, and we got involved in changing some policies in the government procurement world, so that the government contracts actually, there was a little bit more preference for Australian companies. But it's just not that straightforward, right? Because there's all kinds of trade laws and all that kind of stuff, and we're seeing that play out right now, actually, that countries have an international agreement not to give any preferences particularly. Anyway, so we learned and we got stronger through that process, and we were so sick of coming second. But the feedback was always, oh, we loved you guys. You were so much better. You had such better tech and all this kind of stuff. But, you're a little company. You're a little company and we're a big bank. So we'll go with a big tech company. And we're like, oh, yeah. Yeah, it was really depressing. It was really, like, we're all smiling, you listening to me talk about it, but it was very, very depressing. And so we really just had to double down on our partnering strategy. So we had to just go partner with those big guys. And it turned out that was the best thing for us. So we started winning deals. And we just had to adjust our commercial model, because you have to, they get a cut in the deal. So we got really good at figuring out how to splice and dice, how to win the deals, but going through a partner, so with a partner. So sometimes you have to swim with the sharks.
What was the negotiation like with those partners?
Well, look, in the early days we were probably screwed, and we, each deal that progressed, we got better, we got smarter, we got wiser. We also realised we needed good advisors as well. So, you evolve, and next time you just got to keep showing up. I think that's probably one of the themes of what I'm saying, is you've just got to learn, fail forward, keep it together. Like, you've got a great team. You go, come on, guys, we know we were the winners. Didn't get the contract. And also time, right? Some things come around. So a deal that we may have lost 2 years ago and came second to, that company might ring us up. It would happen relatively often. 2 years later, that company would ring us up and say, oh, the project failed with the software that we chose, and you were our second choice. Will you come and do it for us? So, that equally is depressing. But we would often be called into the emergency room of, someone else's tech disaster to fix it when they should have called us in the first place. Yeah,
wow. That's it's a bit heartbreaking, but at least it came around.
Yeah, but if you stay true to who you are and what you do, that you can be beaten by a competitor who is less good than you, and there'll be a mess to mop up eventually.
Did you have any core values or mottos that you were reiterating to the team to sort of encourage them to stay strong and stay persistent, even though...
Yeah, well, I think it's the storytelling, that lived experience, Sam, that we all, you can feel the vibe, can't you, that we were all in it together. We would all see the reaction to the email, when it came in that you came second, and people would literally be in tears or angry, or so everybody felt it, and everybody wanted to get the right outcome the next time. And who knows what the right way is, because the next deal wouldn't necessarily be the same as the previous deal, right? And then we broke through this drought of coming second. I think it was a little bit like an elite athlete, competing against people who may or may not be using performance-enhancing drugs or something, you think, why can't I win? I'm working so hard, I'm training so hard, I'm doing all this stuff, and this guy just shows up and beats me, something's not right here. So we were just persistent and just kept believing in our product.
Do you think first-time founders underestimate the resilience and the amount of challenges that you have to face?
Yeah, they need a dose of reality. They need to just go and crack their head against a wall 100 times and see if they want to keep doing that, right? It's not for the faint-hearted. It's not a walk in the park. But in saying that, it's not something that you should avoid. You should absolutely give it a go if you've got even half a sense of wanting to do something that's where you can be your own boss and create your own future, then absolutely go for it.
Looking back, are you proud of yourself that you've put yourself through the stress and you've come out the other side?
Yeah. My gorgeous mum used to say to me, Chelle, why don't you go and get a real job? And I would just look at her and go, oh my God, like I could probably do that whenever I wanted to, right? But her perception was that, I don't know what it was, that we were working for ourselves. And like it was the sweetest question always. But it was a real question. And I'd always go, well, no, I don't want to go and work for anybody else. I want to keep doing this crazy, uncertain, unpredictable, hard work. You kind of get addicted to it.
Thanks very much for coming on, Michelle. If there's any listeners who want to hear more from you or keep up to date to what you're up to, how can they stay in touch?
Just look for me on LinkedIn. So Chelle Melbourne, or Michelle. Chelle, it's just the last half of the word Michelle Melbourne on LinkedIn. Just reach out and just say you heard the podcast and ask me any questions. And I'm around at the Canberra Innovation Network. They have a meetup every Wednesday, once a month, first Wednesday of every month. From 5 o'clock, they're right in the city at One More Street. They've got a beautiful facility there, startups and scale-ups. And it's the coolest place to hang out if you're a budding entrepreneur. You don't have to have anything specific going on at the moment, but you can come along and see what it's like. It's free.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Michelle.